It's wonderful to see this packed auditorium with people who are eagerly looking forward to this very special edition of Suitably Booked, which is a new series we've started along with the Suitable Agency at the India Habitat Center. And this is very special because it is commemorating the 40th anniversary of a path-breaking landmark novel that appeared in the firmament of Indian literature in 1984. I am so pleased that Namita Gokhale, the author, is here with us, an old friend, and Ambarish is here to talk to her about it. But before that, Namita said, "Will you introduce me, please?" I said, "I'd do it with pleasure. Of course I will." So I'm going to try and keep it a little brief. I could go on, but I will try and keep it a little brief, if I may. We all know Namita very well indeed as an author of many, many books, both fiction and non-fiction, and editor of many other books as well. But of course, we also know that she is, apart from this, has been responsible for Kitab Nama, which is a wonderful program with hundreds of episodes about literature, and thereafter the JLF, the Jaipur Literary Festival. She's a co-founder and co-director of the biggest literary festival on the planet. So I think the list of her achievements is absolutely astounding. I'm very happy that she asked me to do 2 of her audiobooks, which I really enjoyed doing. But I had to confess when she asked me to come here that I had never read Paro. I'd read her latest, just finished it as soon as it was released, Never Never Land, but I had not read Paro. So she hastily sent me a copy and I read it in one go. I kid you not. It was read in one go and I couldn't put it down. And I was astounded again by the fact that this was written in 1984, and I can imagine of course, I was aware that it had created a sensation back then, but also that it is sensational still. If you read it, and it's not just because of the frankness with which she writes about sexual encounters, etc., but also because of the style. The style it sweeps you through in a very laconic way, and she's really found a wonderfully memorable voice for the character of Priya. I'm not going to say very much more about the book because we're going to have from the author herself, I'm sure, a lot about the book and its creation. Just to say that she's from Lucknow also, and I'm also from Lucknow, so that's something that really warms the cockles of my heart, as they say. And I want to read out a few things I've been asked to read out, and 1 or 2 things which I have not been asked to, but I think we should. You know, when the book was released, she was only 27 years old. And the Times said, Namita Gokhale is only 27, but her highly flavored tale of the passions and jealousies of a group of middle-class Indians is observed with the assurance and the subtlety of an extremely seasoned writer. This is one of the early blurbs or reviews which I can fully agree with now, 40 years later. And then just a few others. Sagarika Ghosh wrote just last year, Paro by Namita Gokhale became the first full-length novel by an Indian woman that unabashedly dealt with sexual themes. And Mihir Sharma in the Indian Express said, rereading Paro is to understand once again what made it one of the most memorable Indian novels of the 1980s. And London Magazine simply said, a magnificent creation. Those are blurbs, but I've been also asked to read out by a Suitable Agency the blurb which appeared apparently on the first edition of the book Chatto and Windus published in London. So I'm not responsible. I would have copy edited this a bit, I told them, but I'll read it out as it is. Paro herself is a heroic temptress, alluring and rapacious, the stuff of legend, wandering through the world of privilege, decadence, and Scotch whiskey that rich Indians inhabit. She is observed constantly by the acid Priya, eternal voyeur and diarist, who identifies strongly with the heroine of her favorite novel, Rebecca, and vicariously follows the melodrama of Paro's larger-than-life. Full stop. Priya herself is in love with her boss, the irresistible BR, sewing machine magnate, and the housewife's friend. Paro inevitably marries him, to Priya's fury, but he is merely one among a whole string of admirers. of Paro, that is. Bucky Bhandpur, test cricketer and scion of a princely family. Lenin, Marxist son of a cabinet minister. The fat and sinister Shambhunath Mishra, Congress Party Eminos Greece. Lucas Lioras, homosexual Greek film director. Even very nearly Suresh, the lawyer on the make whom Priya has married. Eventually, as in all moral tales, Paro succumbs to life and circumstances, but not before the reader has been wildly entertained by social comedy without parallel in Indian writing. Sexy, funny, and acute, Paro is a brilliant debut. With those words from the blurb that appeared 40 years ago, I'm going to hand over this conversation to Namita and to Ambarish. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Shivendra, and on behalf of a Suitable agency, I welcome you all to this very special session of Suitably Booked. As the enthralling Paro turns 40 this year, we are delighted to have its author, Namita Gokhale, with us this evening. Namita is one of India's best known and most loved authors, a prominent writer, festival director, and literary activist. She's the author of 23 works of fiction and non-fiction, spanning various genres, including novels, short stories, Himalayan studies, mythology, and books for young readers. Her pioneering work has earned her great acclaim over the last few decades, including the Sahitya Academy Award in 2021 and the Centenary National Award for Literature by the Assam Sahitya Sabha in 2017. Quote, for her literary contributions as well as a service to the nation in supporting and showcasing literary talents and creating a literary environment in the country, end of quote. She is the co-founder and co-director of the famed Jaipur Literature Festival. This evening, Namita will be in conversation with Ambarish Satwik as they discuss the iconic Paro, which is now published as a Penguin modern classic. Surgeon and writer Ambarish Satwik is the author of the critically acclaimed novel Perineum, Nether Parts of the Empire. The book has often been introduced as a rogue and deviant, fictive sexual history of the British Raj. His columns, miscellanies, and opinion pieces on a variety of subjects have been published in India Today, The Times of India, Outlook, Open, Tehelka, Time Out, and Hindu Business Line, amongst others. Thank you, Namita and Ambarish, for joining this evening. I did also want to add that both speakers today are also represented by a Suitable agency, which makes this occasion even more special for us. After their conversation, Ambarish will open it up to the audience, including from the audience that has joined us on Zoom for questions. I'd like to request the online audience to type in their questions in the Zoom chat box when the Q&A session begins, so that Ambarish can keep a track and pick those questions from there. The book is available for sale just outside the room, so please do check it out, and the author is here in case you wish to get it signed. Finally, I'd like to thank our wonderful partners, India Habitat Center, and the team at a Suitable agency for putting together Suitably Booked and its sessions with so much heart and passion each month. That's it from me. Over to you, Ambarish. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends. I'm delighted to be here. And before we plunge into the matter at hand, I'm going to give you a brief and mildly diverting account of my history with Namita. So I've known Namita for God knows how many years. And for all these years, she's been my literary murshid and the presiding deity of my literary career, which is not particularly impressive, but that's not her fault. And it all, for all my sins, I started out by writing poetry. I was abnormally unpromising in all departments of writing, but I was extremely eager, to write. And for my medical education, I was transplanted to the provinces, to a small Mofussil Medical College in southwestern Maharashtra. And it all started with cadavers in the anatomy dissection hall. And I thought, because in the first academic year, you dissect corpses, and you pare them down to appendages and viscera and so on. And I thought, what if I inject grotesque medical imagery into my poems instead of, or in addition to, angst? I'll probably have a winner in my hands, and editors will fight for the stuff. And every 6 months or so, when I trickle back into Delhi, I would inflict these poems on Namita. And Namita would read them indulgently, and her response was most charming. She gave the impression of being comprehensively excoriated by these poems. But I think I have reason to believe that she's been permanently psychologically maimed by many of these poems. But anyway, after a couple of years, she decided to put an end to it, and she referred me to Ravi Singh, who was heading Penguin in those days. And Ravi took a look at it, and he said, "This is good, but have you tried writing prose?" What he was trying to tell me was that if you stop writing these blighted poems and produce serviceably correct prose fiction, you would have a book deal in your hands. And I think he was instructed to do that by Namita. So she was responsible for exorcising me of poetry. Anyway, enough about me, but I thought this was important for context, because otherwise I'm possessed of no distinguishing qualifications to be here with Namita. I first read Paro a little over 3 decades ago. And I distinctly remember that the book ensnared me within the first couple of pages. But somewhere around page 20, I found a line that smacked me squarely in the senses. And it was the following line: "They exuded the civet smell of recent sexual activity." It was the perfect literary ambush. For my youthful and hormonally charged self, I thought I'd stumbled into a literary boudoir, and I realized that this was going to be one properly salacious romp. It was going to be educational because I was learning how to write, but one that promised, in education because of the sheer audacity of the wit, which was ripe, and the prose, which was sharp, and at the same time, it was going to be a massively entertaining, titillating read. So I very happily allowed myself to be drawn into the civet depths of Paro's story and Namita's storytelling, and that line has been lodged somewhere in the dark recesses of my brain, and it comes out every now and then. But to begin, I must say that any discussion about Paro that centers around the book cannot be complete without Namita telling us the story of how she started writing Paro, and without the classic recounting of the Mother Aquinas episode from Jesus and Mary College, and her refusal to endure the works of Chaucer in college, which earned her a swift exit from college, and which eventually led to the writing of Paro. So you'll hear it from Namita in her own words.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Ambarish, because what he omitted to mention was that I am a classic hypochondriac of great proportions, and also with some diseases. And he gets phone calls at odd, strange times, and he reassures me, and I haven't died of any of those things I have complained to him about yet. And he is very patient, so I owe him not one, but several. And secondly, I want to thank 2 or 3 people for being here. I have 3 cousins here, and it's made my day. I won't embarrass them, but they know second row, last row. It means a lot to me. And they've just, yeah. So I was, very proudly, I can say, from a strong literary family. My cousin Mrinal is sitting in the front row, the presiding deity of the audience for me. Alka is sitting there, Raja is sitting there. And I always thought I'd be an artist, but I never got down to that. And then I was in college doing well, studying hard, and then Chaucer hit me. Because I just found it incomprehensible why we were studying Chaucer. I mean, it didn't make any sense to me. And they had a new syllabus there on modern Indian literature in Hindi. And my Hindi wasn't great, but I wanted to do that one. And so I just started studying for it because I found out from Delhi University, and they said, you just fill in paper 8B instead of paper 8A. Now, as salacious and strange things follow me around, the nun who was in charge of the college was somebody called Mother Aquinas, Sister Aquinas, and she had, I think, a sort of unnatural affection for me. And she would call me in the morning to her office. I would run, I'd be there ahead of the librarian in the mornings, and then she'd call me and say, you're looking very pale. Why don't we have a glass of Santorini together? Santorini is a sort of tonic and things like that. And she was a very nice person. But when she found that I was doing the Chaucer paper, first of all, she got upset, why are you getting married? I got married when I was 18. And I said, but I've fallen in love. And she said, no, you're succumbing to lust and all this. So it was all very fervid time. And then after that, and they had a special mass in their chapel the day I got married to look after my soul or whatever. And then after that, I don't know, I didn't just resented studying Chaucer. So, and the course was so delightful. Vaishali Ki Nagarvadhu, Mohan Rakesh, it was lots of nice books there. And I struggled to read them, understand them, and I was all set to do it when she held me back for being short of 0.6% attendance, and she held back 120 girls for various things. My sister-in-law was a lawyer at that time, and she went to court. It's such a long story, it's too long to tell right now. But that got me out of college. And that stopped me from having that slightly academic tone in my writing. In fact, I was probably reacting to the academic tone with it that I had been following. I wasn't writing in Chaucerian overtones. But also, in between, I had set up a magazine called Super, which was a film magazine. Again, a sort of a backlash to the Inglit course. And so I think that's what liberated me to write in a particular way, because Shobha De, bless her soul, and to bless Narihira, who's left the world today. It was Stardust. That opened up. It was, of course, Salman Rushdie and Midnight Children. But I don't know if it was before that or after that, Maska, Karofying and all that came into the vocabulary from not only Shobha De, but from Narihira's absence of conventional thing. And I think people don't sometimes recognize the people who opened the doors, as he did, for linguistic, change. I don't know where I've got in the story, but let's carry on.
Yes, indeed. No. And I think Namita set up a film magazine when she was barely out of her teens, so that's remarkable. And if I'm going to request Shivendra to just project the cover of the first edition of Paro. And but before that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have read Paro, and some of you possibly haven't read Paro. But thank you for creating that character. I mean, she's a creature of absolutely unchecked carnality and unapologetic lust, and Namita has written it like a, full-blown weather phenomenon. She's like a sexual wrecking ball who's wreaking havoc in the lives of men and women who cross her paths. This is the first edition of Paro, Chatter and Windows. And do you like the artwork on the cover of Paro?
I love the artwork in the cover, but I know you have reservations about it. And that's why he asked in that nuanced way, do you like? Yes, I love it. I loved the cover when it came in. I especially loved the picture of Priya on the side. It was designed by somebody who had never been to India. But it sort of looks like somewhere like the people I was writing about. Just today, I was rereading the book after 35 years, more on that later, that I came across this description which I had written, unfortunate, but maybe accurate, where Priya, who loves BR, she says his skin was as soft as his skin was as something as a soft-boiled egg. And this is not, he doesn't look like, he looks more like a burji. But, so it doesn't really match my characters, but it matches the fevered imagination of those times.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's not overlooking Marine Drive, yeah.
Right. No, I mean, not that I know anything about art or book covers, but like any man who's been given a microphone and accidentally finds a captive audience, so this looks like Bhupen Kakkar meets a fever dream after one too many gins. But I'm curious. So you can see Paro's the reclining figure on the sofa. Priya's standing there, and the man who's looming behind Paro is BR. He's the star. He's the male star of the novel. Okay, and he's standing in all his bald glory. He thinks he's looking like a matinee idol. He's got his shirt unbuttoned all the way to his navel, revealing a swath of flesh that should best not be revealed, I'm curious, the men who read Paro haven't understood this. This is the alpha male. This is the Lothario and seductor of Mumbai, who's got women falling at his feet, eager to be, to fornicate with him. I mean, you have to give us some psychoanalytic service here. What are the psychological underpinnings of...
Well, I'm not going down this road at all. I love the cover. I love the cover. And you have to remember that he was short. He hadn't begun to go bald, as I remember this phrase from the novel. And he was very rich. And he lived in Marine Drive. And he just was the sort of person fell in love with. I have to tell you about my photograph, though, because there was a very nice photograph of me which my husband had taken, and he felt very, very hurt when this picture, which was taken by Harper's for a long interview they did, and I thought I looked suitably serious here. So I said, no, I want this photograph. And Carmen Callell, who was the editor at Chatto at that time, she said, Namita, you're looking a bit like Solzhenitsyn in this, with a beard. But I think I like both my photograph, and I love the fact that Priya is on the spine of the book, because she is sort of the spine of the story. So I think we should have a vote, if you don't mind. How many people like the cover, and how many people, you're right, not too many. And how many people don't like the cover? You knew.
Thank you for making me look like a proper idiot. I'll have to dine on my own unsolicited opinion. But you must finally tell us, who are the flesh and blood characters from your life that you've based some of these characters on?
I'll try very hard to be as tactful as I can, because tact is well known to be not my strongest quality. But actually I was walking down Marine Drive with my nephew Rahul, who I can mention because I told him the other day that long walk in the evenings led to this book afterwards. And then when I came home, I just began the story. And I got Priya's voice right. And really the book is carried along by the fact that Priya's voice it's sharp, it's compelling, it's double, it both, she loves Paro, but she hates Paro, so that dramatic tension is there. So it began with that. And then the story just came to me in flashes, and there was a particular businessman I knew, who we had met quite by accident, me and my husband. I found him charming, interesting, and I decided he would be the hero of my novel. So then I took him out for dinner 2 or 3 times, thanks to my husband's credit card. And I talked to him. I said, I'm writing a novel about a book, somebody rather like you. Tell me everything about yourself. And he did. And then when the book came out, I have to say, he read the book and he rang me up and he said, Namita, let's have a drink together. So I said, he said, you know, I loved the book, but my wife, he was also on his third wife by then, as BR was. He says, he said, my wife has made me promise never to speak to you again. But congratulations, it's an excellent book. I said, okay. And then all of yesterday night, I was trying to remember the name of the person. Because sometimes I'm 68, I get memory blips, everybody does. And this person's wife, I can give you her name because she was a dear friend, his ex-wife. So once, the whole picture, I said, somebody like her I'm going to have as Paro. And Paro was actually a composite of 5 different women, all from Delhi society. But this particular person, her name was Chandrika Vasudev. And she was proud of being Paro. Every dinner party she'd say, I'm Paro, do you know I'm Paro? So I can say it. Remember, she died some years ago, but I'm remembering her with affection because she would have said, hey, go for it, Namita. And she was not exactly like Paro, but she had some of that vitality, certainly. And then there were lots of society women in Delhi and political women in Delhi who had some of these qualities. But none of them were individually all like Paro. They were like bits of Paro, but nobody was like Paro because Paro just, actually, I was thinking about it after our brief conversation, and I don't want to be accused of plagiarism, but there was a novel I had read somewhere around that time. It was called, I don't know who had written it. It wasn't a huge bestseller. I just chanced upon it somewhere. It was called Queen of a Distant Country. And it was about a magnificent and tragic woman who could be a bit like Paro. You know, the larger-than-life women, Anna Karenina, Veronica in the... Actually, Archie and Veronica. Veronica and Betty are a bit like this combination also. It's just the good girl who's fascinated by the bad girl, which was Priya, who also came to me. I mean, for about a year, all these people lived in my head, and I didn't have to summon them up. I mean, I just felt I was listening to the conversations and the dialogues. So it just happened. But I mean, I just, yeah, cheers to all those people long dead who gave me, and I would carry a little notebook and somebody gave a good line, I would just quickly write it down. The dialogue came from, I've forgotten who and where and all that. It was a very amateurish way of doing it. But first novel, it happens.
There's a very unctuous and, you know, abominable Congress politician who figures in the novel. His name is Shambhunath Mishra. And he's described almost like a gargoyle. And, but what's strange is that Paro willingly sexually surrenders to him. And she says that he's so ugly, he's so repulsive, that he makes me feel beautiful. And this isn't vanity, this isn't reflected self-adulation, it's kind of masochism, I don't know. But who is Shambhunath Mishra?
You know, I won't say that Shambhunath Mishra was many people. Shambhunath Mishra as a visual image to me was somebody, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to look at Mrinal. If Mrinal nods her head, I'll say, I'll give you the name, and if she doesn't nod her head, I won't.
You must tell, you must tell. It's the 40th anniversary of Paro. You have to reveal.
Well, I'll tell you what it was. His name was forgotten. But he looked a bit like Sitaram Kesri. And I had once gone, but he was of so many people, but there was a particular congressman, and I hope I'm not offending anybody here because it's not about politics, but it still happens today that if you go into certain expensive beauty parlors in Delhi, you find people you wouldn't expect to have the vanity of having a face pack on. And I encountered this person with huge amount of face masks on. This is 40 years ago.
Sitaram Kesri?
No.
Oh, right. Thank goodness, because...
That's similar.
Yeah. Sitaram Kesri submitting to the tender mercies of high-end cosmetology would be another image stored in the
thing
dark
is,
recesses.
as you grow older, you realize that everybody wants to look nice. I'm sure if one of the beautiful young women in the audience or one of the beautiful young men in the audience came across me when I'm sitting in the Lodi Hotel doing things to a face which it is impossible to do anything good, they might feel sorry for me.
Right. Why don't you read something from the book?
I'm going to read a little passage. I thought about it, but first I have to confess. Can I make a confession already? All of you I promised my editor who's sitting in the last row that I won't say this, but since tact is not my quality, I read this book again after 35 years. And I was not going to read it, and I skimmed through it, that I never can go back to anything I wrote. And I realized it's not that great a book. It's okay, I've written better books, written vastly better books. But this is the book that was lucky enough to survive and to reach out to people and all that. So I'm not charmed by the book at the moment, but it has some very good passages, and I guess for a first novel it worked. But I'm completely puzzled, and I hope some of you who read the book now are not puzzled about why it's sort of having its moment in the sun again. Though it has been in print for 40 years. So I'll begin here. It's somewhere in the middle of the novel. And so it said, this is Priya, who's the narrator, and she loves Paro and she hates Paro. So she says, I got quite sick of all this hammy melodrama. One day I asked her outright how it was that she managed to manipulate people the way she did. I always did my duty and worried about other people's feelings and never even got a thank you in return. Everybody just took me for granted, even more for granted than before. And here she was, twisting everybody around her little finger. It was just emotional blackmail, I said. Oh no, she replied. It's part of being a beautiful woman. It's a full-time occupation, and much harder work than it seems to be. But, nodding sagely, it has its rewards, I must confess. I wished I was the kind of woman who could say things like that. But she was a faddist at heart. I remember her silly, short-lived enthusiasms, which all of us were supposed to fall in with. First, there was the yoga classes, which she made Lenin join along with her. She would insist that he wake up early in the mornings and drive her down to India Gate lawns, where, according to Lenin, they had to undergo all kinds of gruesome physical contortions in public. Her enthusiasm was almost a primitive exhibitionism, actually. She would show off her skills to all and sundry, quite unmindful of the suitability of the occasion. There was the chic cocktail party which an industrialist friend of Lenin's was hosting at his farm. This was 40 years ago. So written maybe 44 years ago or something. But Delhi was Delhi. Even Paro was quite excited about it. She dressed to the hilt in a dull green and gold South Indian silk, which reflected the color of her eyes and somehow. And she wore a lot of old-fashioned jewelry as well and flowers in her hair. It took us hours to drive to the farm, for the roads were really bumpy, as they still are, and we lost our way once. But Paro was as full of beans as ever when we arrived and determined to dazzle them all, whatever the means. And dazzle them she did. Once she had downed a few whiskeys, she looked as though a bulb had been lit up inside her, and a sort of electric energy field seemed to surround her. Lenin, Suresh, and I hovered around her like shadows, or like moths, I thought poetically. There were a lot of moths, actually, and all kinds of other insects, as the farm was near the Yamuna River. The atmosphere was quite tranquil, even a little subdued, in spite of all the pretty fairy lights and soft Shehnai music. It was, I could see, going to be a very proper party. Suresh determinedly, that's her husband, set about circulating. When we met half an hour later, Paro was deep in conversation with a very handsome man. Suresh told me, very importantly and a shade too loudly, that he was a rich and famous industrialist who owned textile mills and oil mills and God knows what else. This gives away the age of the novel because nobody has textile mills or oil mills anymore, at least not that we notice. Rich and handsome, I thought wistfully. His wife or girlfriend or whatever it was that he was with, whoever it was that he thought that he was with, was a very beautiful woman as well. She was wearing a stunning sheer net sari with the daring little blouse. I felt cold even looking at her and pulled my pashmina shawl tightly around me. I could see that Paro was bent on conquest. Her lips were parted, her eyes narrowed, and the speculative look I knew so well was rising in her eyes. The woman in the net sari began wilting. Her smile froze as she observed Paro's untimid advances. It remained frozen for some time and was then transmuted into a sort of tremulous, threatening snarl. I could not hear what Paro was saying, but the man seemed intrigued. He looked at her. He looked appeasingly at his date first and then seemed to forget about her presence completely. Suddenly, I found Paro throwing down her pallu and wrapping it around her waist, lungi style. And before I could even figure what was happening, she was on the grass, sandals kicked off, and two long, beautiful white legs pointing like cranes to the night sky. She stood like that on her head for over a minute, in perfect, confident balance. The eyes of every single person at the party were riveted at those long alabaster legs. She looked so nude somehow. Her legs were really white and perfectly shaped, and I could even glimpse her shadowed thighs and black lace panties. Lenin and Suresh rushed up to form a sort of protective cordon. But she was on her feet again, flushed, triumphant, not at all embarrassed. We were just talking about yoga, she said nonchalantly, before they encircled her and led her sternly home. We left a trail of shocked, unbelieving looks and incredulous whispers behind us. So you can see why both Paro the character and Paro the novel just got people that this was, Delhi was on the cusp of change. That genteel old Delhi was giving way to another Delhi. So that's sort of it.
So, Paro's powers of seduction are matched only by her staggering lack of depth. I mean, she moves through the social strata like a predator. She is, she has the morals of a stockbroker in the middle of a financial crisis. She is transactional to the core. Why was your eponymous character, why does she have absolutely no redeeming qualities?
Well, when I look back on it, she had no redeeming qualities, but almost everybody in the novel, I must have been a cynical young woman, and I hope I'm not now, but there was almost nobody in the novel who had any redeeming qualities, except Avinendra, the Jholawala from JNU, who was, he had a bleeding Marxist heart at least. But otherwise, everybody just seemed to show their worst angles to the camera. And Paro was, completely charming, and she led the circus. And I don't know where it came from, but there are so many people like that. If I had wanted to give her some redeeming qualities, I could, but I really couldn't think of any. If you go to the beginning of the book, somewhere she's telling Priya how she was seduced when she was in school by the art master. So you could say, right now in today's world, a whole amount of social and emotional and psychological and sexual hurt could be attributed to that. But she said that she was in love with him and enjoyed being with him. So I don't know. But I have no idea where Paro came from. I don't know why she was so obnoxious. I can see why everybody fell in love with her. And I have no idea why, after 40 years, people are pretending that they want to read about her. And I hope when they read about it. And Paro, but Priya loved her because she was all that Priya could not be. And I think that was very important because in those days, women were very, very careful about their public personas. We were just a few years away from the time when sleeveless blouses were considered evil. Divorcees were it was a different time in the social morality. And at that time, to have a character like Paro, I think it just both shocked and amused people, even if it didn't sort of instruct them.
Let's throw this open. I'm sure a lot of you will have a lot of questions for Namita. Are there mics that can go around? Yeah. Would you please raise your hands so that we can take questions?
Yes.
As an Indian, not foreign, and can you give us names of a few authors whom you have read and you have appreciated a lot? The other thing which is in my mind is, when you are writing a particular novel, do you have the outline of your forthcoming novels in your mind at that point of time, or you go from novel to novel?
I'll tell you first the first question. That I like very much to read. My eyesight is getting a little bit at the moment not so great. I have to have particular light to be able to read comfortably. But I make sure that I'm on the jury of 1 or 2 major prizes. I've been on the jury and the chair of the Dylan Thomas Prize for 7 or 8 years now. And that's for writers under 49, no, 39. And it makes a huge difference to read young writers from around the world, and I really cherish that. And that begins in February every year. February to March, I'm reading these 12 books that have been shortlisted. And it gives me so much insight into how young people are writing, how they're using the language. Sometimes it's a bit shocking, sometimes it opens up new vistas. So, and some of those are not people you encounter all the time. Like there was a poet I read then, I can't remember her name, it's Nidhi Zak or something like that. Have you heard of her? She is absolutely brilliant. And she's from Kerala, and she was on the thing. Or this year, the winner was somebody called Caleb Nelson Azuma, who's Nigerian, Ghana and Nigeria. And that book blew me. So there are lots of books like that, that thanks to that reading, I read. Otherwise, I'm very impatient. I don't have time to read. I read a lot of books for people who are coming to the Lit Fest, but for those, I have a very peculiar way of reading, which is that I read the beginning, I read the end, and then I read the middle. It's like the way some people eat through a sandwich, but that gives me a sense. I know when I read the beginning that, is the end as predictable as I thought it is? Once I do that, let's see what they've done with the middle. That's how I usually often read, unless a book really absorbs me, in which case I read it linearly. There's so many writers that I can't really list out the writers which I care about. But the writer who influenced me the most was a writer called Muriel Spark, died many years ago. And she was a very enigmatic writer, deeply Catholic, very funny. And my new book is, in fact, begins with an epigraph from her. So I'm not snobbish about reading. I think there are lots of self-published books that have something deeper in them sometimes than we may encounter. They've just not found the right marketing apparatus and things. So I read, and a lot of people come to me for blurbs, and I try to read them. So I read anything and everything that I can manage to find time for. But there's a lot of literary novels, which I find increasingly very self-referential and a little narcissistic. And I can't really read them cover to cover sometimes, unless they're very good. Now, as far as planning a book goes, I know I've got going when I have the voice of the person I'm writing about. When I get the voice right, like I did, I think the success of Paro depends on the Priya's voice, which I've got pitch perfect. I don't think it's ever faltered, the tone of her voice. So the voice and the shape. I know this novel will have this sort of shape or this sort of shape. I'm going to begin on a new book. I've already begun. And that's got a very funny shape. It's got a shape, I don't know how you pronounce it. How do you do the Rorschach something test? How do you say it?
Rorschach test, yeah.
Yeah, so it's got the shape of the Rorschach test. It's all over, some story spilling here, and that's all I know about it. But I've begun, and it'll get there. So that's it, shape, voice, and read anything that can hold my interest respectfully. Yeah, please.
Yes,
Yeah.
please, yes, go on.
Mike.
Yes, go on.
Thank you, ma'am. So on question of shape only, I was reading it, and as sir said that it's a book that you read in one breath. And I find it that's because there are no chapter divisions, there are no proper demarcation. It's a book that's I think supposed to read in one go. I mean, was that something intentional in your sense that this book is supposed to be read in one line, there should be no demarcation, or it was something from the editor's perspective?
This was my first novel. I didn't know the rules of writing so well, which was maybe good. And I just wrote it at whatever pace I could manage, whenever I had found the time. And it turned out to be a very compelling book. My favorite book is of my own is a book called Things to Leave Behind. And it is set in Kumaon from 1840 to 1912. And it's much more demanding. And people take a long time to read it. And they say it's taken us, I don't know, 1 month, 2 months to read it. And many people have got through it. So, I mean, I'm happy with that as well. It's wonderful if somebody is reading it slowly. And it's wonderful if you can do it in one read. My new novel, Never Never Land, which somehow picks up so many little cues and stories from Paro, people read it fast. So I think it's the pace of the book and the plot and the voice that reflects on the pace in which people read it. So I think that.
There are a couple of questions in the chat box. One of them is about your Kumaoni background and about Kumaoni resilience. And do you think that the question seems to ask, do you think it has something to do with would you say that your Pahari or Kumaoni identity and deep love for the mountains is at the heart of your work, all your work? Does your stoic resilience to overcome so many personal and professional setbacks, does it come from the indomitable Kumaoni spirit? Would you say it is deeply liberating or empowering?
Well, I wish I could say yes to all those things, but I feel a bit of an imposter. I live in Delhi. I more and more live in Delhi. I go less. I keep thinking this year I'll spend more time in the hills. I go there 2-3 times, but there are so many Kumaonis who sort of have this great romanticized love but live everywhere else and look at the past. And there are so many people who live in the hills through the year and have adopted the life there. Some of them with a degree of fakery, some of them with complete commitment. So but yes, my grandmother and somebody like Mrinal's mother, Shivani, I mean, there have been examples of so many strong and tough people in the previous generation and in the generations around me. And sometimes I see that in my grandchildren or in one of my nieces and nephews, that spark of total Pahari woman anger, or Pahari woman whatever, but I'm sure this is there in so many other places. It's just I notice it more. So I'm very reluctant to take on this whole mantle of Kumaon on my head and be I love the hills, and it's become a habit to write about them because my memory and my background and all the things I've seen there in the past have given me enough material to do at least another 3 or 4 books. But my recent novel, Never Never Land, at least looked at it the way it is now, as an ecological and cultural disaster, sort of. So I don't want to be like this great Kumaoni writer, no. I mean, it's one of the things I write about. It's one of the things so many people who love the mountains write about, and each of them writes about it in their own way. Across the mountains, whether it's in the northeast or whether it is in Himachal or wherever, because that topography and that landscape has so much to give to any story. So I hope that's an okay answer.
There's another question which is, are you a feminist writer?
Well, no. I'm not a feminist writer. I wish I could write more about the minds of men, but I've written because I think men and women are equally hurt and disadvantaged by life, and the other genders in between. I think I am a woman, and so I have sympathy for women, but sometimes I also have even deeper sympathy for the hurts of men and the sexes in between. So I'm not an anythingist writer, but yes, I do have a lot of strong women characters in my novels, and I like strong women. and I encourage anybody I know to be strong in whatever capacity I can. I think there's some answer questions.
I think the lady in the back. Hi, is that Sonia? Yeah. Yes.
Hello. Hi, Namita. Nice to
Where
be
are
here.
you?
I'll stand.
Yeah.
So, a bit of a comment. So, I always feel that being feminist is really being humanist, and
Say that again?
being feminist is actually just being humanist.
Yes, I agree.
And then it could be, you know, men, women, as you said. So, I'm a little. Would you like to qualify when you say you're not a feminist writer?
Yeah, I'm not a
could be
feminist
about men.
writer because I'll tell you why. I hope there's no ism in my writing. I want to write about the hurts and atrocities of. I mean, I'm not speaking about anybody from a moral position. Now, anybody whose first novel, Paro, has somebody like BR and he gets away with it. I mean, I've mocked him, but I'm writing about human beings. I'm not judging them. That's what I'm trying to say when I say I'm not a feminist writer, that I'm certainly not writing in my fiction, I'm not writing from an ideological perspective about what should be or what could be. And of course I observe the hurts of women, and of course many of the women characters in my novel have shown an extraordinary resilience, but I haven't set them up as stereotypes. I mean, it's like that quote, you know, nothing human is alien to me. So I'm not trying to write about the social perspectives, the sexual perspectives, the gender perspectives. I mean, I wish I could write the viewpoint of dogs and cats, and I hope to, and people's gendered identities are such a complex subject. I wouldn't dare go into it without empathy, but I just write about people and the horrible things they do to each other. It's all the fault of having friends like Ambarish who writes about cadavers and so I don't misunderstand. I'm not unfeminist or anti-feminist, and I'm almost certainly a feminist in my personal views. But as a writer, that's not what is motivating my writing.
But you bring a woman's gaze to the books that you
Want to use a mic?
Do you bring a
You
woman's
mic?
gaze?
Yeah.
I'm saying you bring a woman's gaze to your work.
Of course I do.
Yeah, and that, I mean, feminism's fluid, really.
No, that's not feminism. That's being a woman writer. Because women
Yeah.
writers observe things differently somewhere from male writers.
Yeah.
They have, not always, but I don't think I could write War and Peace. I don't think I could write a large novel somewhere. I think my novels are, as you said, situated within the female gaze. And they look at domesticity, and they look at women. But the ist part is not a part of it. I'm not saying the wrong thing and hurting the wrong people.
No,
But
no.
I just write about characters who influence, who enter my stories, and they may be most Paro is hardly a feminist icon, though people like Sagarika Ghosh have said she is the first feminist person who gave freedom, and she wrote a beautiful article saying that clubbing me with Kamala Das and absolutely releasing Kamala Das, Parveen Babi, and what's her name? Yeah, Zeenat, and she clubbed us all together. I was pretty thrilled by that. But I don't know. I mean, I just I wrote one novel in a male voice, and it didn't work until I brought in a feminine voice as well, which I did later. But people, for all their faults, is what I write about. Yeah, wherever.
The
Hello.
lady, yeah.
One gentleman will be very patient there.
Oh, sorry, we'll come to you after she's got the mic. So.
Hello, good evening. I just read the book today and I really enjoyed it. I have a sort of unserious question to ask. So supposing you Priya and Paro are all, stranded on an uninhabited island. What's a book that individually all of you would like to have with you? Perhaps Priya might like Rebecca, but what's a book that you would like to have with you?
But are you suggesting the uninhabited island with all this big library out there, or is it e-books, or what is it? If it's e-books, do we have electricity? I'd much rather say, what would you drink if you were there? If we had access. And Paro is, of course, famous for being a gin drinker, though she drank whiskey sometimes. I don't think Priya drank much. And their author used to drink, but now doesn't, sadly, much. So I don't know, because the novel begins with a sort of tribute to Rebecca. And I'm glad you picked that up, because in a way you could say that Priya is a bit like the second Mrs. whatever, De Winters or whatever her name was. And certainly Rebecca had something of Paro in her. So there is an oblique tribute to Rebecca that the book begins with, where she says somewhere also that his flat in Marine Drive was a bit like Mandalay in the palm of something. I'm forgetting the lines, because as I said, I haven't read the book for ages and ages, and skimmed through it today, and I promise never to do it again. But yeah, I don't know what they would read, Priya is seen as reading Mills and Boon sometimes. And she obviously is somebody deeply influenced by Mills and Boon in the Mills and Boon generation. And the love she has for BR is very much a Mills and Boon love, which this generation does not know. The young people don't know what it meant to have this tall, handsome stranger with a clenched jaw. They always had clenched jaws. And they have to find out why. Dentists, why do you think they had clenched jaws?
BR is described as having a Punjabi Oxbridge accent.
Yeah. Ox-Bias.
Bias is like Bias.
The river.
The river, right. That's a new portmanteau. But what is a Punjabi Oxbridge accent? Ox-Bias?
Well, if you knew the man who did this for me, it's sort of fruity, it's deep, it gets 90% of the words right, but 10% of them display Daddy G's vocabulary. You know what I mean? You can't. Yeah.
The gentleman in blue here.
I think it is really fascinating to see the inner working of your how you are processing. I want to take of how you're writing. I think some of it I'm getting some glimpse, but I would like you to share a little more. I think taking the word shape of your writing, of how you are visualizing it. I want to introduce another word, which is a process. So when you're writing, and currently as you write, how are you arriving at a shape? Can you sort of, from a distance, can share that? How do you see the shape forming? And are there any sort of process which kind of allows you to have that shape?
Well, I just know that I have a shape like my new novel, Never Never Land. I feel somewhere it's a series of vertical lines. It's different stories and different voices that come together. And I knew that, half glimpsed it, and then it happened like that. I remember that Paro had a very clear shape in my mind, but now I don't remember. So these shapes, they just, they find their own way. But I don't actually follow them. They are there in my head somewhere. That's all.
Right. The ladies in the front, and I think we just have time for just a couple of questions.
Because people have to leave.
Yes, indeed.
Namita ma'am, you look diva-like, you look classy. I mean, yeah, and I truly like Zinata.
I've worked very hard at it today. I've been to the hairdresser. I've worn my best clothes. I don't look like this every day. Today was a number here.
And one more thing, I have attended many author meets. It was really heartening to see you entering like it's your own place and, wishing people and signing the books and being informal, I really loved it. I appreciate it. My question is, which vulnerability of human or females was little disturbing to write, or which required a lot of depths?
Well, I don't know, because I think between men and women, they have more or less the same strengths and the same vulnerabilities. And increasingly, because that is reducing, because so many of the vulnerabilities we used to associate with women came from conditioning and how we were brought up. And just in 2 generations or whatever it is, in the last, 40 years since I wrote the book, some things have changed and some things haven't changed. So I'd say the difference between Paro and Priya is of their personality types. Priya could never be Paro, because Paro just didn't care. That's what she was born with. That's what the spunk she had. So, and I think men, women, everybody has, I don't know which vulnerability. I think most of us have such deep vulnerabilities, we don't recognize them ourselves. It's only if you go deep into psychotherapy, you might glimpse the edge of what really hurts you. It's only with a lot of prayer and meditation that I've realized some of my tipping points of the things that really scare me. And often, they're very not important things. So all of us have a different psycho profile, I think. And that's what makes it so fascinating to be a novelist and to probe through different characters. I think, 2 more questions, because I think people will
Yes, indeed. I think the lady in the front,
and
and
then
one more.
somebody's phone that needs to be put off. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful session. You're indeed an inspiration for all of us. So I come from a publishing background, and since you've already discussed your creative process, so I'll just take the discussion one step further.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why Paro is really popular is because of the character's raw energy
Yes.
and unfiltered perspectives. But now that you're a seasoned author, when the book goes into the publishing process, there's also the publisher's expectation and the marketability of the book. And now that there is so much of censorship around, and anything that you can write can potentially hurt somebody or offend a group, how do you as a writer maintain that balance between saying what you want to say and ensuring that the book is marketable and the publisher's expectation is met?
I don't care about marketability. I do. Because one thing I've learned as an author is that all the things where we say this one is going to be a bestseller never is. It's just, you never know which story reaches out to a lot of people. Who would have thought that 40 years later, a book that nobody thought very highly of just survived? So I don't look at these things. I just carry on. And I've done 23 books. By the end of this year, I'll have done 25. Each of them is so different. Maybe if I had stuck to one style, I would have a larger audience. I'm not a huge bestseller or anything, but I have a certain set of people who read my books. And I try to be sympathetic, not to hurt people's feelings. And I'm very fortunate that I have a few editors who are kind to me, in the sense that they don't have any great expectations of me, but when I do slip from a certain quality of writing, as we all do, they point it out to me very tactfully.
More
Or
power
not.
to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, one final question. I think, Namita, you get to pick.
I think that gentleman there, because he's been very patient. And one more. We'll do 2 quick questions if needed, or one short
Thanks,
uh,
question.
Namita ji, Ambarish ji. It was really nice to listen to you. No question from my side, just a few lines to the character of Paro. महफिल में भरा पैमाना बढ़ के उठाया जाता है, अपना टाइम आता नहीं लाया जाता है, वो और होंगे जिन्हें रहता है समय का इंतज़ार, हमारे लिए वक्त को वक्त से पहले बुलाया जाता है, अपना टाइम आता नहीं लाया जाता है.
That's very beautiful. Because truly ये वक्त से पहले आई थी ये किताब, और उसका वक्त शायद अब आ चुका है. You want one more? Should we say goodbye?
I think the lady in pink, yes.
Hi. So
Hi.
I'll try to make the last question better and good. So my question was, Considering the whole book is written from the first perspective, right, the Priya's perspective, and it goes all with.
Say that, it's not coming very clearly, your voice. Hold the mic a little back.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so like the whole book is written from Priya's perspective, and it's
Yes.
written like in I, it's not like
Yeah.
her or she. So while writing, how much of your own views, opinions of yourself was, you know, like how did you make the demarcation that this is Priya, a book character, and this is you and your opinions? Like,
I was nowhere in the book. I'm very clear about that. I'm not like Priya at all. And Priya's voice came to me when I was writing it. And so it was one of those fortunate situations where I could pick up her voice and her voice stayed with me throughout. I could be this slightly malicious, very acute, very sharp woman who both liked, admired, and despised Paro. So it just worked. And I think it's because I wrote it in a compressed period of time. If I had taken forever, the voice might have faltered or something. But it came like a gush of inspiration.
Yeah. So Paro has been anointed as a Penguin Modern Classic. Penguin Modern Classic is a designated work. It's a designated work of enduring literature which has been recognized for its cultural and literary significance. And I think Paro finds a place in the pantheon of enduring literature, perhaps because it's not just because of the sexual humor and that it's titillating, but also because it indicts. So let us raise a toast to Paro, and let's hope it will continue to leave readers aroused, affronted, sullied at the same time.
Well,
and
if I could have a quick disclaimer, I don't really believe in canons. I'm extremely suspicious of them because they are constructs of so many dubious things and some real things. Let's talk about it in the next life. Let's see how much longer Paro lasts. But I'm glad that a book that was ahead of its time has found its season again for however long.
Thank you all for joining us. I believe you'll be signing copies?
Yeah, I'll be signing some copies outside.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.